time to re-up YouTube. We're back with my season preview, and as you can see, we're here with the next edition of the Washington Wizards. I've really enjoyed doing this season preview. I'm sorry I missed out on yesterday, but stay tuned. We're still going with consecutive days of video every single day until the NBA season begins. But as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about the situation going on in Washington. When you talk about mediocre teams in the NBA, Washington has got to be the perfect example. This is an organization that lives to be the 8th seed every year, and sometimes does it and sometimes doesn't. This past year they had a chance to make the playoffs, at bare minimum the play-in, but unfortunately Bradley Beal went out with an injury. But at the deadline they picked up Kristaps Porzingis, they made some moves for players like Barton Morris and Will Barton, and now let's evaluate the roster to see if they really are playoff bound. When you look up and down this team, the first thing that jumps out at me is that they're actually more deep than you thought. There's about 10 to 11 guys that I could see getting legit minutes on this roster next season. Corey Kispert is a nice 3-point shooter off the bench that can provide some real spacing for them. Daniel Gafford is a really solid defensive big with some front court depth. I loved him in Chicago. But the real two pieces that I'm wondering is going to fit on this roster next year, whether they're coming off of the bench or starting, is Denny and Rui Hachimura. In the case of Hachimura, I was never that high on him coming into the league. I always thought Brandon Clark was better than him, but now that he is on the Wizards, you kind of have to look at his situation. He's gotten better as a shooter, but unfortunately the volume is just not there for me to say he's a real floor spacer. He shot 45% from 3 last season, but less than 3 3-pointers attempted a game. And couple that with the fact that his defense is still not up to par, and he's playing the power forward position, which is a very important defensive position in the NBA, and throw on top of that the fact that he lacks availability, and I think the bench is the best bet for him. But in the case of Denny, that's where I start to get a little bit curious about what they're gonna do with him next season. He may not be the perfect player, but on this team I would like to see him potentially even be a starter. There really shouldn't even be a debate if I'm being quite honest, because defensively he is so good. I mean, you talk about defensive instincts, Denny's got that down pat. And sure, offensively he hasn't looked the best over the past 2 seasons, but I've been seeing some of his Euro highlights recently and he's balling over there, I'm just saying. So to the Wizards fans, I'm not gonna sit there and act like I know so much about him, because I truly don't. I'm just really intrigued with his potential on this team. Do y'all think he should be given more opportunity in the offense, especially as a starter? Let me know down below. They also took Johnny Davis with the 10th overall pick in the draft, who I like because of his defensive upside. Offensively though, even though there is some promise, his shot selection is a little bit poor, and he's a very streaky 3-point shooter. And I get that moving KCP was to get some more guard depth, but why would you get that guard depth and then draft another guard in the process as well? It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I know those moves didn't come in that particular order, but it doesn't change my main point. But then you move on to the other moves they made with the notable names like Will Barton and Barton Morris, who they got in the KCP trade. Now though Will Barton thinks he's Steph Curry, but in reality he has a Russell Westbrook IQ, I do believe he's gonna help this team, probably as a spark plug coming off the bench, which is where he belongs. Barton is a solid defender at times, but he can be a little inconsistent. He was in Denver, and though he can have his hot stretches like he did earlier on in the season last year, he can have his cold stretches also, and that kind of player build is built to come off the bench, no pun intended. In the case of Barton Morris, the only problem with him in the starting lineup is defense, but considering their guard situation, it's going to be interesting to see who else would even start over him if he's not the starter. I mean, it's not like Monte is a horrible player. He's a good 3-point shooter, a decent passer, but as I mentioned earlier, he's not going to bring a defensive presence, and you're obviously not going to bench Bradley Beal. But now that we've moved on from the role players and some of the other starters potentially, let's talk about their quote-unquote big 3 of Beal, Kuzma, and Porzingis. Let's start off with the latter though, of Kristaps Porzingis. I mean, you talk about a career filled with ups and downs, that is Kristaps Porzingis to a T. Whether it's injuries, not being able to back down players that are 6'1", Luka Doncic not passing him the ball enough, it just seems like there have been so many obstacles in Porzingis reaching his full potential that he's probably never going to reach at this point. But now that he's on a situation like Washington where he's obviously not the #1 option, and on most nights he may not even be the #2 option, I do love this for him. He definitely is not the perfect player. As a 3-point shooter he can be a little bit streaky, and defensively outside of his shot blocking he doesn't provide too much, but on a team like Washington I think that that's enough, especially if he plays like he played last year after the trade deadline, which granted was only 17 games but was good nonetheless, as he averaged 22 points a game, nearly 9 rebounds and 3 assists, short of 2 blocks, and shooting 48% from the field, 37% from 3, and 87% at the free throw line, which accumulates to a very good true true shooting percentage just short of 61%. Porzingis provides size and length to a team that desperately needs it, and if he can maintain just a little bit of that 3-point shooting and give real spacing at the 5 position, I ain't gonna lie, that's a huge boost for this team's offense. The only concern that I have for Porzingis, which is an obvious and big one, is his health. Porzingis has not played 60+ games in a year ever since his sophomore season in 2017. Now, I'm not gonna sit up here and guarantee Porzingis to be healthy or ask him to stay healthy, because those things are just not realistic at this point. But I do suggest that they upgrade their front court depth just in case as a precaution. I believe Hassan Whiteside is still available on the market, and sure, he is not the best big, there's a reason why he is still available, but he can be useful in spots that you need him, hell, even when you have Porzingis there, because Porzingis is not the best defensive big in the world and Whiteside isn't either. But hey, there are definitely some benefits with having both of them on the court. Offensively and defensively, they do have some size there. But honestly, let's be real, Whiteside is just there as a precaution for when Porzingis inevitably does suffer an injury. But enough of this injury talk. Let's move on to Kyle Kuzma. I genuinely do believe that Kuz has got to be one of the most underrated players in the league. He was balling out in the second half of his season last year and nobody was talking about it. As in his last 35 games, he averaged 21 points a game, 9 rebounds and 4 assists. He shot 47% from the field, just short of 36% from 3 on 6 attempts a game, and 74% at the free throw line. He's a very solid defender, capable of switching on multiple positions and defending the pick and roll. He's a good passer, and as many people know, he can get flashy with it from time to time. A reliable floor spacer, can put the ball on the floor and create for himself. I mean, he really is one of the most versatile wings in the league. Want him to play a small forward position? Sure, he can do that. Want him to play the 4? Sure, he can do that. Want him to be a spot up shooter? He can do that. Want him to go out there and get his own shot on the ball? He can do that too. Want him to go play defense on the best wing? He can do that. Whatever team he's on, he's going to provide so much flexibility, and I'm so glad that he's on a team like Washington where he can showcase it to the best of his ability. And next year, I'm expecting him to be the #2 option full-time to Bradley Beal, and we're probably going to see him average around 20 points per game. I can't wait, for real. But speaking of Bradley Beal, that brings us to our final player and segment of this video. I'm still in the middle of recording this video, and I can tell it's not going to be as long as my other ones because there really isn't that much to say about the Wizards or Bradley Beal. I mean, we know who these players are, we know what they're capable of, we know their expectations, and we know how good Beal is. Beal is one of the best scorers in the league, capable of scoring at all 3 levels, and has shown potential as a playmaker over the last couple of seasons. The only real problem is 2 things. I don't think Bradley Beal can be the best player on a championship team, and if he could be, this is not the team or organization that he can showcase it on. Beal is really the Damian Lillard of the Eastern Conference. He has said multiple times that he wants to stay in Washington for the rest of his career, and I respect it, as long as he doesn't go around complaining about his situation for the next couple of seasons. I mean, you chose to be there, so you can't be mad when things go south, especially for an organization that has been mediocre for most of your career. I mean, this team more than likely will not make the playoffs, and if they do, they're going to be swept instantly in the first round. And throw on top of that, they're not going to be receiving any high lottery picks due to the fact that they're actually trying to compete for a playoff spot. And now Bradley Beal already damn near owns the team. He has a over $200+ million super contract, and the kicker is he also has a no trade clause. Oh my goodness, that's insane. With the way the Wizards negotiated that deal, you would think they had Michael Jordan coming back. So as far as my expectations for this team, I'm not expecting much. I'm just expecting them to compete for a play-in spot, and I actually think they are going to be a play-in team. But once they get there, whether they win or not, they're going to get smacked in the first round and then rinse, cycle, repeat for next season. This is exactly what mediocrity looks like, and as much as I want Bradley Beal to compete on a real team, if this is what he wants, this is what he'll get. And what's ironic about this situation is that if Beal actually left, it will be good for both sides. Not only could Beal go to a situation where he could be in a better position to compete, but the Wizards would also be in a better situation because they would have a definitive future instead of just trying to be mid for nothing. If they traded Beal, they could get assets that would further help a rebuild that is desperately needed. So in a way, you could say that Bradley Beal is actually holding the Washington Wizards back. But that wraps up this video. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure you drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and press that bell for post notifications. Comment your opinions down below on the Wizards. Do you think I was wrong, right? Let me know down below. This is your boy Young Mustard signing out. You guys stay safe and have a blessed day. Peace.